Good evening. My name is Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood, and I am here to talk to you about a friend of mine. And yes, I did use that word friend. This is someone who I am a spiritual advisor to, who I've gotten to know, who truly has become a friend of mine. Scott Eizember. He is a prisoner on death row in Oklahoma, and he is there for the 2003 murders of A.J. Cantrell and his wife, Patsy Cantrell. He is scheduled to be executed on January the 12th, 2023, and his clemency hearing is coming up on December the 7th, 2022. You know, over the last few months, I've gotten to know Scott. And Scott is by no means a perfect human being. But he is by no means the devil either. So often, when we think about human beings, we think in black and white terms. We think good and evil, righteousness and demonic. We push back and push things into these corners when sometimes life is far more complicated than such dichotomies. You see, on October the 18th, 2003, Scott Eizember broke into the vacant home of AJ and Patsy Cantrell. They were an elderly couple in Depew, Oklahoma. He thought that they were going to be away for an extended period of time, and so he broke into the home. Again, I say a vacant home. A home in which there was no one there. As he was there, he got something to eat and a number of other things while he was there. But as he was there, the couple unexpectedly returned home. Eizember picked up a shotgun that he'd found in the home, and he engaged them with the shotgun. Patsy and Scott began to talk, and the situation subsided to the place where Scott set the gun down. You see, after Scott set the gun down, he began to walk towards the front door, to walk away from the situation. And instead of walking out the door and that being that, he heard a click. And after that click, A.J. Cantrell fired off a shot. He saw that, I guess, as his opportunity to eliminate the situation. Perhaps even eliminate the threat, although Scott was walking away. He fired off the gun, and he grazed Scott, actually just slightly grazed Scott. And he shot and killed his wife, Patsy. Again, A.J. Cantrell fired a weapon at a man who was walking away, an unarmed man who was walking away, being led by his wife, and accidentally shot and killed his wife. Eizember turned around and he wrestled for the gun momentarily. And of course, the reason he did that was because he felt like that if he didn't, A.J. Cantrell was going to kill him. Well, in the midst of all of this, Scott ends up killing A.J. Cantrell, perhaps out of anger, out of self-defense, out of an amalgamation of things that were taking place in that moment. After that, Scott retreated from the house, left the house, and led authorities on a 37-day manhunt that seemingly embarrassed the state of Oklahoma that he was allowed to get away for that long. There were a number of other violent incidences that happened during that 37-day period, but ultimately what Scott was sentenced to death for was the murder of A.J. Cantrell. You see, the prosecution was able to say specifically that Scott's actions that they immediately killed A.J. Cantrell. Well, this creates a really difficult case for those who argue that the death penalty should be reserved for the worst of the worst. You see, this is a situation in which we are talking about a situation that spiraled out of control. We are talking about someone breaking into a vacant home. We are talking about someone who was preparing to leave the home after being confronted by the homeowners. And again, A.J. Cantrell's actions, whether he functioned based on his idea that Scott was still a threat, however he functioned, his gunshot obviously killed his wife, but it was also a precipitating event that made this situation go out of control. That doesn't mean that Scott had to kill A.J. Cantrell. It hardly means that. If Scott hadn't been in the house, none of this would have happened in the first place. Let's make that very clear. But at the same time, when we talk about the worst of the worst, we are talking about serial killers. We're talking about people who kill for no reason, who have extended amounts of premeditation. This does not seem to be one such crime. This does not seem to be a crime in which countless people are murdered based on pure evil intent. This seems to be a situation that spiraled out of control. So often, when we engage these cases, we engage details and problems and struggles that are not pretty. This is not a pretty situation. But the question is not whether it's pretty or not. The question is whether Scott Eizember is the worst of the worst. You see, everybody who advocates for a death penalty argues for the worst of the worst. And if that's who you're arguing for, that is not Scott Eizember. This case does not present a crime that is the worst of the worst. In addition to all of these facts of the case, the argument of the worst and of the worst, my feeling that this is not a death penalty case, that certainly Scott deserved to be punished, but that this is not a death penalty case. There are two other issues that should also speak to whether or not Scott Eizember should be executed. One such issue of concern is also the fact that he grew up in a home ravaged by drug addiction and alcohol abuse. You see, when Scott Eizember was only 8 months old, his mother committed suicide. 8 months after she gave birth to Scott, she committed suicide. Later on in adolescence, his stepmother, who was also a maternal figure in his life, died of liver disease. Before this incident with the Cantrells, Scott had suffered from years of alcoholism, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations, and so much more that complicated his life and created these situations where he felt out of control. and perhaps these situations where he wasn't as in control as he might have hoped to have been. In addition to this long lineage of drug addiction, alcohol abuse, depression, anxiety, suicide, all of these different things, during his case, there were two jurors. They are known in the litigation as DB and JS. These two jurors during jury examination before the trial both exhibited clear bias in favor of a death sentence. One juror even used the statement, "The death penalty keeps taxpayers from having to support a criminal for the remainder of their life." You see, in our country, a death qualified jury, a jury that is qualified to render a death sentence, must be able to consider all options. They must be able to consider life, and they must be able to consider death. For DB and JS, it is very clear that both of them were unconstitutionally, problematically predisposed towards the death penalty. And so I think it is fair to argue that Scott Eizember also did not receive a fair sentencing phase of his trial. But all of this comes to naught if you just kill somebody and throw away their life. You see, we are in a society that thinks that it is okay just to throw people away. Now, and as time goes on and I advocate for him, I am asking you to think about the circumstances that have led to a death sentence for Scott Eizember. I am asking you to ask yourself, is he the worst of the worst? If not, I'm asking you to advocate against this execution in Oklahoma. I'm asking you to take a step further and ask yourself, what is it like for someone's home to be ravaged by drug addiction and alcohol abuse? What is it like for there to be suicide, anxiety, depression, and all these different things? And I'm asking you, is it fair for someone who grows up in such a circumstance to be treated as if they can just be thrown away? Surely these are mitigating circumstances. And if you believe that they are, I am asking you to advocate against the execution of Scott Eizember. If you think that here in America, people deserve a fair trial, a fair sentencing, if you think that it is wrong for people to be predisposed towards the death penalty before ever having heard an ounce of evidence, if you believe that, if you believe in the justice and righteousness of our legal process, of our Constitution, I am asking you to oppose the execution of Scott Eizember in Oklahoma. You will have the opportunity in both the comments and as I post this video to sign up, to sign the petition asking Governor Kevin Stitt in Oklahoma and the Pardon and Parole Board in Oklahoma to stop this execution. I'm going to read out the address of where you can go on Action Network to sign this petition. Just type in bit.ly/Scott Eizember. bit.ly/Scott
SCOTTEIZEMBER. That is bit.ly/Scott Eizember. Please join us as we petition the governor, as we petition the Pardon and Parole Board. Please join us as we say, Scott Eizember is not the worst of the worst. Look at the mitigating circumstances. See that he didn't get a fair sentencing phase and stop this execution.